Welcome everyone to a new episode of Singularity Watch, a journey through realities and people to better understand where we're headed. I'm Ollie, and as always, my co-host is Kavya Perlman, founder of the XR safety initiative XRSI. Hi Kavya, and congratulations for your participation in CBS's show 60 Minutes.
Oh, hey Ollie, thank you. Thanks everyone. Interesting experience. In fact, coming right out of the show, this makes perfect sense because we're going to talk a lot about accessibility, WebXR, all kinds of fun stuff that, developers community might really care about. We're going to talk to Fabien Benetou, who's a developer, more importantly, an innovator, working as WebXR consultant for the European Parliament Innovation Lab. I met Fabien, actually, thus far I've met him on a couple of policy and these type of panels where we have global discussions about regulations and technical specifications that impact safety and stuff. And it's always been interesting and intrigued me, how he works in the sort of the nitty-gritties and the code and everything, but has all this understanding of all the way to higher levels. So I think Singularity Watch is pretty perfect to have that discussion.
So before we teleport into the interview, just a quick reminder to anyone following us. If you like what you're hearing, then please consider leaving us a review on Apple Podcasts. And we're all really interested to hear any considerations you had while watching. So feel free to leave a comment right here on YouTube. Hi Fabien, great to have you here.
Hey Ellie, thanks for having me.
Is it very hot where you are? I'm just asking this. Yeah, I was thinking they should invent some kind of cooling system that goes through the head gasket so that you've got water running through it. I've been thinking this all day.
You never asked me that kind of question. I got a job too.
There are some actually for the index. You have little fans, not water cooled.
I've got those. The ones on the top here, the Vive and Chill, or what's it called? But they need something inside and maybe something for the rest of the body too. Let's start from the very basis. You're a WebXR consultant for the European Parliament Innovation Lab. What is this lab for everyone viewing, and why does the European Parliament need that?
Sure. Okay. So the colloquial answer to this is that we measure bullshit. That's not the official title, in case anybody's wondering. It is not what we officially do, but this is my way to interpret it, because basically, as you mentioned, or as you implied with the headset right now, when it's hot, there are a lot of little things that could be improved. So that's one way to say actually headsets are good enough, but there could be little small ways to do it better. And sometimes it's not like that. Sometimes you see a video from a certain company and they sell you dreams, and you want to buy into the dream. The problem is the dream cannot be bought. It's just bullshit, and that means it cannot be transformed to a tool that somebody working at the European Parliament could use, and it could also not be, for example, regulated because it just doesn't exist. And so there need to be somebody who say, hey, does this actually exist, and what can we do with it? Or is it just an ad that makes no sense and we need to check again in 6 months, 1 year, 5 years? So that's roughly, say, again, the colloquial version of what we do at the European Parliament Innovation Lab.
Okay, I see. So does that mean that you act somewhat like a filter in some way?
Yes. It's checking. Yeah, filtering, I think, is a good way to summarize it. We also put it into a context because sometimes those tools or solutions might actually be great, but only work, I don't know, in the context of advertising or in the context of military, or I don't know, because they are too expensive or they are, whatever. So it's filtering also in this way that it's not just, let's say, bullshit, but it's also, can it be used in the context of the European Parliament or of EU citizens, or is it broader than this? So it's also filtering in terms of, is it usable today? Is it dangerous today or tomorrow? And ideally, because that's also the hope, is that in the end, if it is not bullshit, if it is good enough, can we actually use it as tools? Because the goal is also to, I mean, we hear a lot of critics, sometimes justified, sometimes not, that public institutions, governments are slow and they don't know what is like emerging technologies, what is this new tool. So we try not to be late on this. And if it is actually a good tool, like why not use it? Why not incorporate it in the workflow of the parliament? So yeah, it's filtering and also a bit not proactive, but really challenging the existing workflow.
But how much of that part includes any kind of security privacy review? It kind of reminds me of my job back at Facebook because I was like filtering all that bullshit.
So well, now what happens basically is with GDPR. Anytime we use any tool that does process information, is it GDPR compliant? It's like you don't even have to ask the question. It's and we tried the parliament since it put it into place. We try to lead by example, which it's just between us, that conversation, right? So just between us, it's a pain because we're not used to think that way. It's like, oh, it's a cool shiny tool. Let's use it. It's fun. It's interesting. And now it's like, wait, it is fun. It can be interesting. Maybe it's bullshit. Maybe not. But what information is there? What is it processing? Who is it processing? Who is processing what? In which cloud? This kind of question becomes now nearly second nature. So that's yet another filter, let's say, to say, hey, in terms of information, who does what and where, basically, like quick summary of it.
That's
great.
Cool. And obviously super important for a big sort of mammoth-like institution, right? Like all of them usually are. So in terms of WebXR in particular, would you like to give us a kind of a definition? And are there varying sort of definitions for that? Because we often get this in new technologies. We often get words that everybody interprets their own way, and then there might be a standard definition, but people kind of take them to mean what they want. Yep. So does WebXR have a definition, your definition, and how is that standardized?
So I'll make an analogy first, or a shortcut. It's basically clicking a link, a URL, and getting into VR or AR. That's it. You get a URL, you get it from anywhere, an email, an SMS, whatever, a chat message. You click on it, and boom, you're in this world. Or if you're in AR on the phone, you see some augmented object, but there is no app. So that's in practice what happens. It's, of course, my biased opinion, the best distribution channel, because we have browsers everywhere. So that's what it is. And in terms of actual definition, WebXR is a specification, because you have Chrome as a browser, but you also have Safari, you also have Firefox, you also have Edge, maybe you have done your own browser. And what makes those browsers powerful is that if you go on your web page or someone else's web page, it's going to work. And for this to work, those browsers has to get together and agree on some specification, some shared way, some consensus, basically, on how to interpret the code of a web page. And the WebXR specification is a specification for this, to say, again, immersive world, something all around us that take our entire field of view for VR, or augmenting the real world for AR with 3D objects and whatnot. How is that going to work on every browser? So that's what it technically is. And it works through the W3C, the World Wide Web Consortium, which is, again, those different browser vendors, being Alphabet for Chrome, being Mozilla for Firefox, etc., that get together and say, yeah, I think this is the best way to do it. I think this is the best way to do it. I think this is wrong, etc. And I don't know if you participated to such event, to specification discussions. It's very, very abstract because you don't talk about, let's say, code itself, but how code is going to be used, by whom, if it's going to be used, let's say, in the long term, short term, and of course, then what are the security implications, what are the privacy implications, because you want something feature rich, you want it to do everything possible. But for example, what stuck into me was when in San Jose for the first W3C specification group on what was then WebVR. There was no AR yet, just WebVR. It was someone at Google who mentioned that yes, we want to do everything, but the same browser that you're going to use to do those funny or exciting VR experience, people are going to use it for banking. They're going to use their credit card information, their IBAN, whatever, and they're going to pay their bills with it. So if your crazy little VR experience is broken and somebody can find a way to go through and steal this data, it's obviously, you don't want to find your bank account data leaked.
So. Yeah, but let me get back to one thing that you just said earlier. You get an URL and you click on it and it goes boom. Well, that sounds very, very scary from my perspective. Does that sort of alarm you? Am I right about that?
So what usually happens with well, I'm an optimist, so it doesn't alarm me so much. But maybe I'm a naive optimist. Right now, no, it doesn't alarm me. To be very direct, it doesn't alarm me because it's still very. I wish it wasn't, but in practice, it's still very experimental. So it's not like everybody's using VR and AR 5 hours a day. So we're still, if it's done right, I think it's going to be fine. Also, there is the technical aspect. Let's say again, WebXR specification, browser implementation, and all this, and also the cultural aspect that you receive a link from someone, you don't know that person. Hopefully, you're going to maybe good like hygiene basically habits that it's a stranger sending me a link. I'm in my VR headset. Maybe I'll double check, or maybe I'll want to go on a preview first. What happens though is the same way that when today you receive a link in, for example, Jitsi to do a video call, it's going to ask you, do you want to share your webcam? It's not going to straight up share your face with whoever is there. So you're going to have those prompts requiring user action to make sure that it is indeed what you want to do, not just somebody hijacking, let's say, the webcam or this virtual world. And it's basically the same way for immersive mode in VR that again, take your whole field of view, is you need to say, yes, I do, I accept this to go in full VR mode. So what happens is first, when you load the page, you're going to have the boring 2D view, let's say. So you're going to have a little window to that world. And if that window, this looks not scary or legit or whatever you were expecting the person to send you, then you can click I accept. And I think, but I'm not sure, so don't quote me on this, but I think there is for now no way to auto-accept. The same way with a webcam, you can say, hey, I trust Jitsi website, or I trust my friend's PureTube website, auto-accept every time. I don't think it's feasible for VR now. I imagine it will be, but yeah, again, it's both technical mechanisms and hopefully good habits that people develop to say, hey, this is the button that I need to push if I trust that.
Going forward, this is going to be extremely important, especially when we have contact lenses, right? And you just boom go into VR without,
I love.
I mean, it sounds weird, but it might actually be true, right? One day.
Why not?
It will be. It will be. Just maybe 10 years. But it happened.
And we've got a 7080 Ti on my eye, right? Developing 400 watts.
There's a TV show called The Feed on Amazon Prime. It's all about that, getting your feed hacked.
Is this like a documentary type of thing, or?
No, it's a drama, and it's kind of gets awful towards the end, but still good.
Well, of course, Black Mirror. I don't know if you guys have seen that. That's awesome.
It's nearly mandatory viewing. I mean, if you like, sorry to interrupt, if you like tech or if you're curious about it, so my nickname on Twitter and elsewhere is utopia. But I love dystopia. I love Black Mirror. I love all those. First because it's intriguing. You get curious what's going to happen. And also I do hope, again, maybe naively, that those are little warnings. And if you put like a big warning on someone's face, they might be like, just let me do my thing. But I think fiction invites you to think, and it projects in a future that doesn't exist yet. It's like, shit, I don't want to go there. This is freaking horrible. And I think it might stick a bit longer.
I've wondered about that.
Talk about global perspective, actually. You're a technical advisor for Unicef Innovation Fund. When one thinks about Unicef, one clearly thinks about children in crisis areas or in the global south. But for sure, one doesn't think about AR/VR, usually considered like the niche domain, just like we discussed, in the richest countries. So what are the state of XR in developing countries?
So first, it is a crazy challenge. So it's normal that people don't think about it. It is obviously a crazy bet, but as you said, the name of the initiative is the Innovation Fund. So it's a fund that bets on startups from developing countries, from countries where there is UNICEF country office, and it's countries where you don't necessarily have electricity, or at least not, maybe you're going to have electricity, maybe not. And on the same day, maybe it's going to get shut down 3 times, maybe not. The worst example in my experience has been Nigeria, because I believe it's like maybe not the top exporter of crude oil, but at least one of the most important. And they don't have stable electricity there. And even in the economical capital, on the south, they have, even in the fanciest hotel and whatnot, like you have electrogen groups, and it might again get shut down a couple of times a day. So you have those kind of crazy places where it should be where it is energy rich, but not with the right infrastructure, not with the right basically government that is going to transform it in a way that is going to be usable for citizens. So it does not indeed sound like the kind of place where you would go with emerging tech. But the idea on why UNICEF is making that bet, first is that it's pragmatic. So the fund is about 18 million or 20, let's say $20 million. So for a fund, it's significant, but it's not huge, not like a massive part. And for the total budget of UNICEF, it's a fraction of it. So the idea is not, okay, we're going to stop building schools, we're going to stop helping in different refugee camps, we're going to, no. It's like, we make a crazy bet, but it's part of our core value, our core set of solutions, but it's a very small part. So that I want to clarify that first, that it is the crazy bet that we really hope with all our heart, but also effort, that is going to pay. But yeah, we're aware that is crazy. And for example, in Nigeria, I met an entrepreneur there. She's been working on her startup for 2 years, more or less now, about providing basically not VR for school. The idea is not that. VR per se is useless. We don't care. It's providing, for example, a chemistry lab to a school that doesn't have one. That doesn't have one because it's either too risky or too complicated, too expensive, or let's say electricity unstable, and then having simulations through VR, even though it is not the same than the actual chemistry lab, it is one pragmatic, let's say, alternative. And because even though those headsets are far from perfect, they are actually, for example, the Pico or the Quest, they are relatively mobile and compact. So you don't necessarily need computers with them. It's far, as we all know, far from perfect, but now it got relatively mobile and compact, so relatively resilient. So it has a lot of, and one of the, let's say, concept behind those is basically leapfrogging technology, a bit like I'm sure you've read about, for example, in Africa, you have some countries that don't necessarily have access to banking system for a lot of citizens. But so they pay with SMS. They pay with a mobile phone, and the mobile phone is starting to be, it's a shortcut, but a replacement for a credit card or a debit card. And then why is it leapfrogging is because in Europe, in the US, or sometimes we look at China, it's like, they pay with QR code. It's like the money of the future kind of stuff. And it's to say that those countries that did not have the infrastructure are relying on a new technology, let's say mobile phone, 3G or 4G, and then go straight up to, let's say, virtual money or payment without this.
Yeah, totally reminds me of M-Pesa in Kenya. They use this type of, mobile is the only way to transfer their M-Pesa and stuff is the way to go. You mentioned simulation and training. What are the areas, what are other areas actually of XR that can be particularly beneficial for these developing countries?
So physiotherapy, for example, like we move around, we have to use our body. Yes. So it makes sense. It's pretty logical that VR is embodied. We have to be there, which is intellectually very rewarding, but also, for example, it's a bit of I stuck I got some neck trouble, I don't know, 3 or 4 years ago, and I made a little WebXR version to watch Rick and Morty in VR, and I had to here I'm pointing at my hand, but basically you had Rick and Morty playing on my hand, and then if my gaze was not on it, it would stop playing the video. So I had to basically do like this.
Oh, right. Amazing. So it was like a mobility, forced mobility while watching film. Awesome.
Yes. Because honestly, I hate doing those physiotherapy exercises. I find them dead boring, but they work, so I have to do it. But yeah, I need to find some kind of motivations. And the thing is, maybe I'm childish, but it happens that a lot of they also don't want to do their physiotherapy exercise. So finding ways to make it more entertaining, either with VR or also with AR. And it's the same. For example, we had a startup in Turkey 3 years ago that was using physiotherapy. No, not physiotherapy. Physiotherapy and forgot the name, but basically against fears of dogs. There are a lot of children getting eaten by dogs in Turkey, wild dogs. Yes, basically, and they were doing rehabilitation more or less in VR to say, well, you need to be cautious with dogs.
To things that you're afraid of. This was the idea, right?
Yeah.
Oh my God, that's amazing that you're doing the exact same thing. And
yeah, absolutely. I'm actually developing an app for physiotherapy, as I am a physiotherapist and now a developer as well. So when you said that, I was like, yeah.
It makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's patient compliance is one of the huge problems of rehabilitation, right? Because you tell them, do your exercises. Have you done your exercises? Well, not this week, but I promise I will next week. Yeah, all right.
But sounds like basic stuff that we really need, in real life that we need. Those kinds of apps are very useful in developing countries. Yeah.
Yeah. And usually it's also for physiotherapy, for example, if I remember correctly, one of the main motivation was that we don't have enough therapists. So we need to find a way to make a quality treatment in more maybe remote areas, in harder to reach areas. It's impossible basically to send someone, but a device, yes. So that's roughly the idea.
Yeah, absolutely.
And sorry, just to go back also with what you asked in terms of mission for UNICEF a bit earlier is it's not on its own, meaning that I think if it were to say we're going to send your headset to Kenya or to Vietnam, I think I wouldn't do it. Like I wouldn't want to support this kind of initiative. But it's again in countries where there is a UNICEF country office, meaning that it's going to be with a potential, if the startup makes sense for them, with the support of somebody who might know the Minister of Education there, who might know some other entrepreneur there, and just find the right connection in the network. It's going to be, for example, UNICEF has the GIGA initiative, which is about finding schools that don't have connectivity. Because, for example, for WebXR, so the beauty is distribution, instantaneous distribution across platform, but in the web part, you need the web, so you need a connection. And if you don't have a connection, it's just going nowhere. So UNICEF also has the GIGA initiative, which is mapping the world, all the schools in the world, and finding the ones that are in, let's say, dark zone without any connectivity, and then fixing that, finding a way to make it happen that they do get a connection, and then there can be, for example, startups that are going to use WebXR or going to use the web to deliver a solution. So it's not on its own, and if it was the only thing done, I think it would make just no sense. But because it's with past projects, with existing network, it is still crazy challenging. When I discuss with some of those entrepreneurs, I'm like, just speechless. But I'm like so amazed at what they are doing. It's so, I mean, VR in itself is already hard. It's challenging, but in such a context, it's even harder. But that's why I get pumped in trying to help them however I can. But it's again with a whole network, a whole support, past initiative, other initiatives. So it's not, in its little crazy bubble.
As everyone who's used to using an HMD knows, there are still some major issues in terms of accessibility, because applications are often designed with a specific interaction in mind on a specific device. So how can WebXR, or can it in the first place, be a route for accessibility? How would that come about?
It solves everything.
Okay, well, that's a great answer.
Nice.
I mean, it solves everything. Well, the thing is, it solves everything in theory. In practice, it's still a lot of hard work because, so jokes aside, I mean, when I said it's the best distribution, I actually meant it. I'm not saying it's perfect, but again, you have one link, and like you buy a fridge today, it's going to have a browser. That's the level of how pervasive that distribution channel is. You got a watch, got a browser in it. It's just crazy. But that's also the challenging part. Is it means your content need to go from a watch to a VR headset to a tablet, to AR glasses, to everything. And WebXR is enabling this, like the kind of content that can go basically anywhere. But it means, and I'm not a designer, as anybody who had seen my work would attest, but it means you need to think about it, let's say in terms of how you're going to shape your content for it. And then you're going to think even further back in who is going to be actually using my content, and like not the average user, because that doesn't exist. So you need to actually do a proper reflection on accessibility. And one example that struck me, just like a little tiny story, it was the same at the 2016 W50 workshop, was somebody who started by saying, what about VR for blind people? And I was shocked. I was like, no, no. And then after he explained why, because I don't know if I don't think it was him, but either a friend of him who loved technology, got excited by it. He was a geek, and they were chatting about hey, it's the technology of the future and everything. And it has, for example, spatial audio. It has also interaction. So it's not just visual. It's the primary mean. It's true, but it's not everything. And then, for example, we have here social interactions. And the visual part is important, but might not actually even be the most important. And then, when he started to explain this, I was like, no, VR cannot be also excluding people that are already in challenging situations. So that was a kind of what the heck moment, kind of it clicked. I personally, though, when I say it solves everything, I cannot do this in terms of like the complexity of the design, how you need to think about the interaction. I mean, it's really complicated. But there are people that are smarter than me that work and figure this out.
I wanted to ask you to try and make a prediction, right? The WebXR frameworks and libraries we have today are in competition with each other, just like we've seen for every other emerging technology. It's enough to think of, they've now made OpenXR, but before that we had all the different problems with input systems in Oculus and Unity and all that, and OpenVR. So when is this war going to end, and when are we finally going to have one standard, and who is going to be the survivor of that? It's worth noting that our author, editor-in-chief, Marco, is betting on A-frame.
So he's wrong, of course.
Oh!
It's going to be a bit harsh, but I personally did bet on A-frame. What was it, like 2016 or 2015, late 2015, I think I did a hackathon, and a friend of mine was like, I was working with 3GS at the time. He shared to me like, oh, did you see this HTML-like framework? So for people who don't know A-frame, it's basically if in high school you did some kind of like a small website in HTML, and you made a div or a photo image tags, it's the same but for 3D objects, roughly. So you make your page on the web, but instead of being flat, it's in 2D or in 3D or in VR. But it's kept rather basic. It's not made for professional developer. Shortcuts, but the philosophy is this: if, for example, you give programming classes to kids, you could use A-frame. That's the motivation, and the strategy behind this was that you have this many Unity developers, you have this many Unreal developers, and you have this many web developers. And then you had things like GeoCities or old school websites that were crazy, aesthetically, well, I don't know. Everybody has their own opinions. But why were those websites not always the most beautiful? Is because anybody could do it. You didn't have to be a professional developer to do your GeoCity website. It was quite welcoming, again, with all the quirks and all that, but in the end it was for anybody who wanted to. Not anybody, but for a lot wider audience than a professional, I don't know, Dreamweaver developer, whatever it was back in the days. So A-frame was that, and the problem is there are that reaches a certain level of complexity after which it becomes trickier to do something more complex or visually impressive or optimized. It's not impossible, but because the audience you targeted initially are non-professional developers, the level of quality is unfair. The level of efforts involved, for example, I don't know what's the... Well, let's say professionalism. This way it's a bit redundant, but it's safe. So yeah, you're not going to have people that invest necessarily a lot of resource or efforts in it. But it's easier to access. And then you have 3GS, which was what A-frame is based on, with a much broader, more developers, but less who are interested in XR or VR and AR. And now so you have Babylon.js, another framework by Microsoft, Play Canvas, another framework. You have, what is it, like Lua VR? I forgot the name. You have, I would say, a dozen or 2 dozen framework, so quite a few. And I don't think one is going to be the most popular, but I don't think the other ones are going to disappear because, for example, the Lua framework, I think it's Loya, I forgot the exact name because it has some umlaut or some weird characters. There are maybe 50 people using it, but those 50, they're pretty passionate. So it's going to remain a niche, but it's not going to disappear necessarily. And I think this diversity is pretty good because in the end, they have different mindset. Maybe they're going to focus just on data visualization, other ones just on animations, etc. So it doesn't really bother me if there is not the one single framework. WebXR though, as a specification, this is important because it means your content is going to work everywhere. But which framework you decide to use, as long as it does support WebXR, and all those frameworks do.
We don't have a final winner, but we do have to reach to our final question.
Okay.
Should I, Ollie?
Yes, absolutely. Go for it.
Singularity time, yes. So every guest that appears on the show, we tend to either in the beginning of the show or at the end of the show ask, what do you think is singularity? Are we there yet? Or what do you think is sort of a timeline? When are we going to actually get there?
So, so how long do I have for this answer?
5. Okay, let's say a few minutes.
Okay. Okay, because I have a pretty convoluted answer. That's why I was hyped by the actual the idea behind the singularity. So I did an internship in China, in Shanghai, in 2010, I think, or 2005. I forgot. More or less those years. Was amazing. I had a blast, and the CEO of the company, who was working on Facebook before Facebook was popular, gave me that book, or he gave it to me. Anyway, he recommended basically, I guess it was Kurzweil, but let's say a book about the singularity, and then I discovered it, and I was blown away. My mind was like, wow, what is this? It's crazy. And then the robots and the AI and that stuff that I worked in uni, but it's not there yet, but it might be, and it's going to change everything. So I had really, my brain exploded for a couple of days or weeks, I don't know. And then now it doesn't anymore. So maybe I got used to it or whatnot. But I think what I mentioned at the beginning about how, for example, we get used to a video prompt or like a webcam prompt on the browser, and then we have the technical solution, say, okay, you need to allow the webcam, and then we have, I don't know that person, so I'm going to double check exactly what the URL is, or so those kind of mechanisms, I think. You asked me if I was worried about this. Oh, you get into VR. Because it takes time, I'm not so worried. And I think the singularity, I don't know if it's going to happen or not, if we're on the ride. I think as long as we have an interesting ride and we take care of each other as a species, as human beings, even interspecies, we take care of our ecosystem. I don't actually really care if it's happening or not. Sorry, it's probably not the right answer, but I think as long as we have a positive ride together and help each other alongside it, I think that's fine.
It's a beautiful answer. In fact, the recent, conversations about UAP, this is the first time somebody's actually factored in that as long as we take care of other species and more than just human beings, there could be other intelligence that we may encounter. Mm-hmm. So I love that answer. Thank you.
Yeah. And it's so cool how everybody gives a completely different answer every time. And they're all valid. So in the end, it's interesting to hear. Okay. Thank you for coming, Fabien. It's been really great. We've got loads of info now that I don't think we even knew about totally. At least I didn't know about many of things you've talked about. So thanks for that. It was really awesome listening to you.
Thank you, Fabien.
Well, that was my pleasure. Thank you so much.
So this time, I feel rather hopeful that this technology won't explode in our faces. What about you?
Yes, people like Fabien actually give me hope. Specifically, him being part of the whole Unicef Innovation Fund and taking these emerging technologies to other countries and making it more relevant. So I believe if we're responsible enough and keep our eyes open about safety and all these privacy, it might just be, not be so dystopic. And I'm quite hopeful. But hey, it's the end of the episode, so why don't we remind everyone how to get in touch with us?
Absolutely. So you can find us on readyhacker1.com, on YouTube, Twitter, Facebook, and all the main podcast platforms. Thanks to Marco, Tim, and David for making this show possible, and happy journeys to all of you.
Happy and safe journey.